There is something that most of us have experienced, but few of us stop to deeply consider. Coincidence. Those little moments or little things that feel too precise to be random. Timing, signs, messages, intuition, inner knowing. What if those were not just chance, but threads of a larger divine story? Welcome back to the Anatomy of Life podcast, where we delve into the elements that shape our existence. This is your guide to the building blocks of your life: relationships, community, purpose, your mind, body, and everything in between. Because at the core of it all is health, the foundation that shapes how we live, grow, and thrive. Today's guest is the author of 2 books, The Divine Language of Coincidence and Consciousness Beyond Death. She's a spiritual memoirist, counselor, and educator who blends her personal journey of miracles and synchronicity with a deeply compassionate approach to loss, meaning, and consciousness. With a diverse background in architecture, which included working with Buckminster Fuller, couture fashion, and mental health therapy, this guest's life has been shaped by paying attention to what many would call coincidences, but which she sees as divine communication. She leads workshops such as Living a Fearless Life, particularly for at-risk women, and is passionate about helping people to hear their inner voices, trust in unseen patterns, and live in alignment with purpose. She is none other than Sophia Demas, and today Sophia will share what it means to recognize miracles in everyday life and how we can open ourselves more fully to spiritual awareness and how that intersects with healing, activism, and truth. Welcome to the Anatomy of Life podcast, Sophia. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for that wonderful intro.
Sophia, tell us about who Sophia is, where you're from, and the work you do and how you got into that.
Well, I'm an ordinary person, and at the age of 19, I was going through 2 existential issues that I felt could not be solved. They were deeply troubling me. And then within a very short period of time, I had met a man, and I had a very dramatic dream. And as a result of that, my issues were solved. One of the issues was I had bought into my mother's rule of no sex before marriage. Marriage was not a concept that set well with me. I felt like that I would be trapped, that somebody would be telling me what I had to do. And so I thought, wait a second, if I don't get married, am I going to die a virgin? And so it was, and then here's this man that I met that I was deathly attracted to. And I was 19, he was 27, and he was getting his PhD in like universal theory or something. And then I had this dream where, I never remember my dreams, but I remember this one, and all of this is chronicled in my first book. So the dream begins where I am wearing a wedding gown, and I'm on a stage, and the auditorium is filled with people, and I'm in a plexiglass box, which was strange. No groom in sight. And I'm just thinking, oh, this is so wonderful that all these people came to see me. And I just had to conclude that this was my wedding, even though there was no groom. Anyway, and then at the very end of the dream, people were filing by me, and so I thought, oh, this is the reception line. And most of the people were not even turning their head to look at me. And I was sort of like every one in, I don't know, 10 or 20 would look at me. And then 2 smiled, which was my best friend and a family friend that I trusted. And then at some point I look down and I'm wearing the wedding dress, but I'm in a coffin.
Oh.
And so these people were like paying their last respects. And I woke up in a complete panic. And I just put on my clothes without even thinking. I was a robot. I went to this man's house at 1:30 in the morning. And I knew he was up because he would work late. And he welcomed me, and I told him my dream. And because I was thinking, okay, this is telling my imminent death. He sat me down and he said, this has nothing to do with physical death. You have beliefs that need to die because they're no longer working for you. And
Yeah.
they are to be transplanted with beliefs that work for you. And that just made so much sense to me. And then he goes and pulls out these papers that he had written poems about me and my situation. And I just couldn't believe that this person knew. And so, needless to say, this was my first sexual experience. It wasn't that night, it was a week later, which was absolutely memorable. And then the other issue was needing people's approval. That every once in a while, somebody would just not like me, even knowing me. And after that dream, at the age of 19, I feel so fortunate. I never, ever cared what anybody thought of me since. And it was one of the most freeing experiences. So I was transformed. I mean, this dream transformed me. And it wasn't lost on me. This just couldn't be a coincidence. I mean, this person came into my life and then he just left. I mean, it was like, I was a party girl. He was an intellectual. I could only talk about, philosophize and talk about existential stuff to a point. So it just dissipated. And so I thought, wait a second, what just happened here? Here is this like an angel. This person appears and solves my issues and explains it to me. So that's when I started paying attention and things just started happening like that.
So, how do you distinguish between random coincidence and what you could call divine communication? What are the hallmarks that you look for once you started to look at coincidence?
That's a good question because there's coincidences and then there's meaningful coincidences. Those are also called synchronicities. For example, a coincidence is, let's say that I'm writing something and I write the word transcendental. Okay. So it's a word I use once in a while, transcendental. It's not at the tip of my tongue. And then at that very same second, somebody on the TV says the same word at exactly the same time. And you think, oh my God, from
What a coincidence.
the vocabulary we have, what a coincidence. But it has no meaning. So my coincidences that I feel are meaningful were it was like what I call a cosmic frying pan hitting me on the head. I mean, it's bigger than me. So I have some examples of that to illustrate what I mean. Here's two coincidences, and by miracle, I mean getting exactly what you need at just the right time. So that's my interpretation. These two miracles or gifts that I received happened to facilitate my wedding. Okay, and this happened in a short period of time. My fiance at the time and I decided to get married on the 4th of July, and the wedding date was set to be the 4th of October. So we only had 3 months to prepare for this wedding. And pretty much all the venues were taken. We couldn't find musicians. It was so we thought, okay, whatever.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. And my friend was a wedding event planner, so she would make it work. However, I did get a call from one venue that was quite expensive. I believe it was like $3,000 at the time, and they had a cancellation. So we were going back and forth. Our budget was tight. And just at that time, I was calling my friend and a man answers that I didn't understand. And I said, is Anne there? And this man says, Sophia, it's Jerry. You called me. Look, I'm getting ready to go to a meeting. I'm late. Can I call you later? And I recognized his voice because he had a Greek accent. And this man I knew socially. And I mean, so I had misdialed by one digit. And
What
by
are
the
the chances?
guy that I know, And so I said, Jerry, promise me you're going to call me back. This was I misdialed. I wasn't calling you. You have to call me back. Okay, promise. And he promised, and he calls me back. Well, as a result of this phone call, I told him I was getting married. He owned the Barclay Hotel at the time. And in Philadelphia, it's this old world, beautiful hotel. And so he offers me the ballroom of this, and he throws in the presidential suite for 2 nights. But he wanted me to invite him and his girlfriend to my wedding. So I was so that is one. So here is a coincidence that yields
Meaning.
exactly what I need. Yes, at just the right time. The second one was I got a call from this woman who told me that she found my driver's license. And I had even though I was in Philadelphia, I had an Oregon driver's license where I'm from. She said, how can I give it to you? And so we realized that she just lived 2 blocks away. So I said, oh, just put it through my mail slot. Okay, so that was it. It was a nice little note how much she loved Oregon. Okay, so that was not it. Okay, so now we're just before the wedding, and what I had decided was for music that I was just going to have the church organist. What else? So I get a call from her, and she says, you might think this is a little strange, but I just found your ATM card.
No.
Now, I don't lose cards, but lo and behold, I would go to this one machine that would take the card and then spit it right out. So I would put it in my purse. Well, this machine kept the card until the end, and then it said, would you like another transaction? Oh, because I was used to
It's spitting it out.
spitting it out and having it, I left without the card, the money, but without the card. So the next person could come in and wipe out my whole money. So, well, it was her. She says, would you like me to put it through the mail slot? And I said, no, we have to meet. She came to my studio, and I had this handmade soap from Oregon to thank her. And as a result of that meeting, come to find out that she's a concert violinist. She got for our wedding present, she got her friend, who was a classical guitarist, to play my favorite piece of music, Concierto de Aranjuez, while I walked down the aisle. So here's the takeaway, okay? The first miracle, okay, when Jerry said, I'll call you back later, I could have said, don't bother. This is a wrong number. I mean, this is a wild coincidence.
Yeah, I didn't mean to call you.
I have nothing to talk to you about. And when she said, should I put it through the mail slot? I could have said, yeah, this is so wild, but yeah, just put it through the mail slot. You see, it was both of these coincidences were like smack on the head, like
in your face.
Yes. So that is the difference.
You're speaking about paying attention. You were being open when those people you noticed it. You noticed that the call didn't happen by coincidence. You noticed that this woman having your cards wasn't by coincidence. So what practices or mindsets help someone become more attuned to things like that? We would think it's a small nudge. That's a pretty big nudge. But what practices or mindsets help someone become more attuned the way you were attuned in those instances?
There's many practices that people can do just in their daily life. For example, gratitude. We live in what I consider to be a miraculous place. Okay, I feel that living here on earth, having a body that is capable of doing so many things is just miraculous. I look around at nature and I go, who designed
Wow.
all this? And other people just go on their day without
Noticing.
even noticing or thinking about it. So this is what I would like to put out there. That's how it's an awareness.
Keeping gratitude. So, besides practicing gratitude to notice these little synchronicities, what else can people do to practice the attunement, to start to really notice and practice noticing these little nudges along the way in life?
Okay, so I'm going to give you my kind of basic philosophy.
Mm,
Because of my experiences, I believe that there is a divine intelligence out there, force that
mm,
knows what's best for us better than we do. This entity communicates with us via dreams or
mm.
by putting coincidences in our path. Now, so we can either notice the coincidence or just let it go by. So
Yeah.
what happened here is this is how all of this came to really let me know exactly what is going on here. So these, let's say, miracles that were happening to me, I would tell my friends about them, and everybody would say, "Oh, these things only happen to you." And I thought, well,
That
how
can't be
can that
true.
be special? I'm an ordinary person. And then in 2000 and I had met a medium, and that's a whole story by itself.
Oh, I've always wanted to meet a medium.
Okay, well, this is a world renowned medium. And she told me I was going to write a book. And I had absolutely no desire to write a book. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, but that's not in the cards. And I said, I have nothing to write about. And I'm a people person. I'm not going to
Mm,
sequester myself and off somewhere and write a book. And she listened to me. I remember her hands were crossed. And she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. So in 2011, I'm reconnecting with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle. And she said, these things only happen to you.
mm.
And something clicked. It was like, okay, wait a second. Everybody has a coincidence story or a miracle story, or they have signs from a departed loved one. But I have the number of them are so many. It's pretty remarkable, you know. So what I did is I sat down and I listed as many of these miracle events as I could chronologically. And then I noticed that preceding each event was a coincidence. I had a coincidence. And then what I realized, I had taken action on that coincidence. For example, like the
Call with
coincidence,
Jerry.
the one where I missed out the number and I got Jerry,
Mm,
somebody I knew. I took action, made a meeting happen. I made him call me back. The next one with the violinist, when she called me to tell me about the ATM card, I said, no, we have to meet. So each coincidence, I had taken action on the
yeah,
coincidence. What I realized is I co-created the miracle with this divine intelligence. It was a
amazing.
co-creation.
And we
And
all have the ability to do that.
yes. And
Mm.
so that is when I thought, no, I have to share this knowledge. I have to share what I just discovered. And so writing a book was a perfectly natural thing for me to do.
Yeah. And we'll definitely come to one of those books, but you are now retired
Yes.
and you've worked across different domains, architecture, like I said before, the couture fashion, mental health therapy, especially with the Salvation Army being your final hoorah. These are very different fields. But Sophia, how did those experiences inform your spiritual work and help you see life more holistically?
It has been a journey, a spiritual journey. So when I was in architecture school, all I wanted to do was design beautiful buildings. That was it. Just wanted to design beautiful spaces. And meeting Buckminster Fuller, which is a whole story, also chronicled in the book, who was my idol. That was my first architectural job out of art school. He invented the geodesic dome. And his philosophy was more with less. So it was problem solving, helping humanity. Beauty was a byproduct. And so what that taught me was to look at architecture as a solving problems. But my last stint in architecture was designing biotechnology laboratories. That was as far away from beauty as
Possible.
I got into fashion. So then I started my own dress designing company, I wanted to design evening clothes and make women feel beautiful. And I realized that I had clients that were beautiful women, beautiful bodies, filthy rich, and they were miserable. And then I had these women that were, fat, and they just had confidence and just loved their bodies. And I'm like, what's with this picture here?
Because society tells you it's the opposite.
Yes. And I realized that these women really feel better just by putting on a beautiful dress. I mean, there's something wrong with this picture. And what I concluded was that there was a problem with self-esteem, that because of childhood issues or whatever, people suffered because of a lack of self-esteem. And that's what propelled me to go back to school and get my master's in counseling psychology. And I developed this program, Living a Fearless, 12 workshop program that I piloted in the Philadelphia prison system. Administrators were like, these women their behavior is changing and their confidence is going up. So what happened, if you can see the trajectory here, is, it's like, oh, I just want to design a beautiful building. No, getting to solving a problem. Then, oh, I just want to design a beautiful dress. And it's like, no, because
getting to solve a problem.
Yes,
Yeah.
the problem figure became the challenge. And then finally, going back and really helping people one-on-one. So it's been a journey.
And you were touching on the Living a Fearless Life workshop and what happens in it. You explained to us what inspired it. And what changes did you witness from this workshop?
Well, it was a satisfaction. It was personal, truly feeling satisfaction in helping others. It became my true purpose. That what brought me the most
Joy.
contentment, yes, is knowing that I had helped someone. My last stint, when my employer was the Salvation Army, there's a residence they run which houses ex-trafficked women. So there was a lot of trauma here. And these women did not want to come and see me. They didn't want to relive this trauma, but some did. And I worked there for 1 year and then they lost funding. But I had 2 success stories. And if you can have one, would have brought me great satisfaction, but to have 2 of them. And one woman who could not even look at me at the beginning. She had concocted some story about me in her head, and she went from not even being able to look at me to coming every week to see me, then going back to school to get her master's.
That's fantastic.
That is more, money is not
Yeah.
my motivator. I would say that looking at what is before you and taking action and devising, like, what is my true purpose here? I would say that is something that people could really just be open. I would say to be open. Let's say I desire something, but sometimes, and I have thanked God not only for these miracles, but for the obstacles. Obstacles are also put in our way to save us. And one I can tell you, I mean, which is unbelievable, was our honeymoon. We were planning to go to Mexico, southern Mexico, for our honeymoon. There was this place that my friend would go every summer, and it was between Huatulco and Puerto Escondido. And there were 9 clay huts on this bluff overlooking the ocean, and they were owned by this cordon bleu chef. So you would stay in these huts, and then you would have this amazing food. So we thought, okay, this is perfect for our honeymoon. And so my friend also had a friend that had a beautiful resort at Puerto Escondido that we were planning to visit. So I had heard that you could get into Mexico without a passport. My passport had expired. So I thought I can get into Mexico with my driver's license. So we get to the airport, and the agent said, "May I have your passport?" And I said, "Oh, you don't need a passport to get into Mexico." And he says, "Well, you're right, but you need one to get back in the States." What? No, we didn't have time to go back home and get. Oh, he said I could bring my birth certificate. That would get me back into the States. So we go back home. I was so depressed. I just couldn't believe it. And I was just sitting on the couch. Frank was trying to cheer me up. Nothing worked. And so finally, Frank says, "Why don't we take the next flight to Mexico City and have dinner in Mexico City and then take the next flight the next day?" So I thought, great, okay, I'll go for that. So we go to Mexico City. We found this charming hotel. We have this great dinner. Next day, we were flying into Huatulco. And so we go up to the counter, and the agent says, "Oh, I'm sorry that this was the last plane to Huatulco because they're having a hurricane." And I said, "I don't care. This is my honeymoon." I said,
Yeah.
"I want to go." And he says, "If you go across that gate over there, there's a plane to Puerto Escondido that's leaving in 20 minutes. So we run over to the gate, get that plane. It was the last plane to Puerto Escondido. And we arrived there, and it was a hurricane in full force. So we knew about my friend's friend who had the resort. So we go to the resort, gorgeous resort. And we went to have lunch in this sort of under a thatched roof pavilion. And I'm having this soup. And all of a sudden, I knew we were in trouble because part of this thatched roof, the hay soup, and I'm like,
That's not supposed to happen.
and I thought, okay, something
Up.
So I grabbed the waitress and I said, "We'd like to order food to take to our room." And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, the kitchen is closed. The chef is only making food for us." And I said, "What's he making?" And she said, "Potato omelets." I said, "We'll take 2." We get the omelets. We had wine from the wedding. I grabbed some plates and silverware. We go back to the room. The owner brought us candles. And so we had this romantic dinner in the room. Water is coming through the shutters, and
Oh my God.
Frank is sweeping water out of the room. The next day, things had calmed. There was no running water. We later found out that 450 people had died during this hurricane. Then what happened was during the hurricane, we left and went to the airport and went to Haka and just rode out the storm. And so when we got back, the road had now opened to the place where we had originally scheduled to stay, with the 9 huts. So we take the bus to this place, and we discover that 7 out of the 9 huts had gone down a mudslide. And there were 7 people there, including the chef, that were sleeping in one hut because the other one was damaged. So the takeaway here is maybe I should have listened to, there's a hurricane there, and not insisted on
going.
Had we not missed that flight, had we taken that flight, we could have been in one of those huts going down the mountain.
And you know that so many people's spiritual paths begin or deepen through their suffering or their trauma. So, stuff like this, like with hurricanes or loss of a loved one.
Yes.
I mean, I can attest to stuff like this, but how have your challenges, loss, grief, injustice, things like this with the hurricane, shaped your understanding of miracles or coincidence? And why does trauma or suffering often lead someone down a spiritual path?
Well, to explain this, I feel that people are in different stages of a spiritual journey. And so trauma is part of life. And it's the way somebody perceives
Their
that.
trauma.
Is it a trauma or is it a lesson? I have developed a 3-stage journey to spiritual awakening. The first stage is from the perspective of wishful thinking. So people on this level wish for something, the coincidence happens, and they go, oh, wow, what a coincidence. Yeah. Let it go, don't take action, and continue to wish for what they desire. Another coincidence, okay, no action, continue wishing for desire.
So they're not noticing the coincidence.
They may notice it as a coincidence,
but they don't do anything about it.
Take action. The second level is from the perspective of hope. So at this level, you notice the coincidence and you go, okay, I'm going to take action and hopefully I will get what I desire. And then the third level is from the perspective of faith. And I believe that when you're on this level, you don't worry about anything. I mean, if it's something that you perceive to be negative, it's to let you know not to go there, or it's part of life. It's just this acceptance of whatever is thrown at you is part of life. That's how I can explain that.
You were touching on religion, or faith, and you identify as a Greek Orthodox Christian.
Yes.
Yeah. Yet you're also drawn, and I'm similar to you because I grew up in a Christian home. My mother is a practicing Christian. And so I identify as Christian as well. But you also draw from teachings across traditions like the Buddha or the Toltecs, etc., etc. How do you integrate those? Your faith, your Christianity, and then the teachings from Buddha and the Toltecs. How do you integrate those?
Well, it's how one looks at Christianity. I mean, to me, Jesus was a teacher. Buddha was a teacher. I think what makes one a Christian is accepting the resurrection. But interestingly, I was asked by a podcast host, she said, everybody has a coincidence story or a miracle story, but you've experienced so many that it's remarkable. What do you attest it to? And I gave the credit to my mother. So my mother was a very religious woman, but she drew her spirituality from her religion. So it wasn't just
Christianity.
She really practiced prayer. Greek is my first language. So if you take a word in Greek and you put a type of suffix, you transform the word. So let's say you have a glass, and then by putting this little suffix, it becomes the little glass. So it adds cuteness to conversation. So what she would tell me, now this is when I was like a toddler.
Yeah.
And I remember she would say, Sophia, if you want something, just ask little baby Jesus, for what you want. And if it is going to be good for you, he will give it to you. And if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're scared of the dark, just ask the little Virgin Mary to protect you. And so what she was doing was making these entities like they were my friends, and
Yeah.
that communicating with unseen beings was perfectly natural. And so I've since a toddler, I have been asking for what I want, and I've been thanking God for what I have, and I just get more and more. And I would say if there's a takeaway here, it doesn't have to be formal prayer. You could be just walking down the street, thinking of what you'd like. And what I like to add at the end, because we don't know what's best for us, so we could be desiring something that is not beneficial. So I always put, this is what I want, and, or what is best.
I do something similar, and then I add as well with no harm to anyone and all good for everyone.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So your work has drawn attention from scientists studying synchronicity, ADC, which is after death communication. How do you see the overlap between scientific inquiry and spiritual experience?
What science has come to realize is that synchronicities produce miracles. I mean, they're productive. And so there's now scientists that are studying. Synchronicity is really trending among science.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, because when I wrote my book, there was just so many events to cram into one book that I plucked out all the ones that had to do with death. And that has become my second book, Consciousness Beyond Death. And so there's this, oh, you should look this up. This is an amazing group in the UK. It's the Scientific and Medical Network. It's a group of esteemed scientists that study paranormal
Activity.
They invited me to help plan and participate in their Synchronicity Summit as the only non-scientist, non-academic. It's very cool. They're catching up, And at first, they were not interested in my second book. Now, have you heard of this book, Proof of Heaven, by Dr.
Yes.
Alexander?
Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Eben Alexander read my first book and loved it. Then when he found out I was writing the second book, he said, send me the manuscript and I will endorse your book. So I sent him the manuscript and he writes back, this is so interesting to me. And he says, I'm sorry, I cannot endorse your book because there's not a substantial discussion of consciousness. Well, that was pure BS. Because the entire foreword written by Dr. Deborah Green is about consciousness. But it was code, okay? It was code for, I am a neurosurgeon and I can nearly die, go to heaven, come back and write about it because it's an NDE, near-death experience. I can't touch your topic with a 10-foot
pole.
So what happened, lucky for me, just before publication of the book, a new field of science was kind of ensconced, ADC, after death communication. So now there's interest in the book. It's just a matter now because these scientists don't want to risk their reputation. So that is why they might be interested, but they can't be official about it. So now yes, this new field has given them permission to study after death communication.
And now, what are some, like, we're talking science, we're talking faith, we're talking synchronicity, or we're throwing all these buzzwords around, but what are some simple, everyday miracles or coincidences that people might dismiss, but which you believe carry deep meaning?
Because people often say to me, well, I want to experience these coincidences or miracles, but they just don't happen to me. If you think about how did you meet your mate? If you hadn't gone to that cafe that day, what drove you to go to that cafe? Or I know a friend who met his wife. He took a different path, walked down the street. This woman is coming the other way. Their eyes met. And then he turned around and then went after her. And they ended up having coffee and they got married. So if he hadn't walked that way, he might not even think that this was a miracle, that he happened to go a different way. You start thinking about, wait a second, how did I get to this career? How did I meet this person? People might realize that they've been experiencing these events without knowing.
Throughout their life. I think the big takeaway from there is, for anybody that's listening, is to, when you take a route, and this is just a simple practice, if you take a route, like say you're going to work and there's a bunch of traffic that there wasn't traffic before, and it forces you to go down another avenue, and something happens along your journey, that is coincidence and synchronicity. It's synchronicity.
A gift,
Yes.
something that is beneficial for you.
And so you emphasize that noticing isn't enough and that taking action matters. Can you share a story where acting on a coincidence changed something big in your life? You've already shared quite big ones, but have you got another one that you can share with us that really changed a big part of your life?
I don't discern one miracle as being bigger or better than another miracle, but what I will present here is a life changer. I have threaded this story throughout the book, and that is my relationship with my husband. So very early on, I realized that Frank had anger issues. I would do some innocent gesture, and he would take it as a put down, like I was putting him down, and he would explode into this rage. And the more I kept trying to justify it, the more rageful he would get. And this went along with the relationship because I saw how important it was to him. And he was this wonderful, mild-mannered man that these episodes stemmed from childhood issues.
Yeah.
So finally, he tried everything. He found this great therapist. The rages continued. Then he went into this men's group. There was a bunch of ragers. It was called Menergy. And the rages continued. So finally, I came to, that's it. I'm done. So I came to a point where I moved out and I never wanted to see the face of this jerk ever again. So are you familiar with A Course in Miracles?
No.
Okay, you have to look. Yeah. I resisted reading this book for 2 years, and it kept slapping at me from different perspectives, and I resisted because it looked too much like the Bible, and it had numbers on the paragraphs, and not my cup of tea.
That's how I felt about the Power of Now book.
Oh, okay. So finally, I am forced to read this book, and this is also chronicled in the first book because it is miraculous the way I was forced to read this book. I would consult this book. After it was amazing. It has one of the reasons that I resisted was that there's no author. It was channeled by this woman, and that just didn't sit well with me, And I began to trust the advice of this book. So I would open it randomly with some question in my head, and what I would get was just exactly what I needed. Or it was advice or guidance or whatever. So one day I decided, well, I'm going to opened this book. And I was just really excited about my next chapter. And I was feeling so free from this guy. And I opened this book to this chapter titled The Healed Relationship. I didn't want to read it, but the rule is you have to read to wherever you open the book. And what I got out of it was God is in everyone. And if your brother comes to you with his hand outstretched to connect with you and you say no to your brother, you are saying no to God. And I'm like, oh no. Okay, if Frank calls, it's not going to kill me to connect, to talk to him. He calls the next day and he wants to talk. Well, I mean, I have to. I said, okay. I had him come over and I even had him sit across the dining room table from me because I wanted that separation. I remember saying to him, the only reason you're here across from me is because of
this book.
And he says to me, well, I have a miracle for you too. Oh my God. I mean, this is like, like a different vocabulary. So I said, okay, go ahead. And he tells me that he had been working. We have a fountain in the garden, which is like a basin, and then there's this tall column. So the water comes out from the top of the column, hugs the column, and goes into the basin. And this column is very heavy, and it's cement. So he says, I was fixing the pump in the fountain, and the column fell on my hand. Now, I look at his hand because he's talking, he's trying to take off his wedding band. And if that was true, his hand should be hamburger. And I look and there's a bruise with a little tiny scratch. And he takes off his wedding band and it's crushed. And he tells me that the wedding band took the weight of the column and saved his hand. Well, let's see. That is, I needed to hear something that dramatic to disarm me. I was completely disarmed. It allowed me to agree to see him, and we started seeing each other. And then I had already made plans to go to Hawaii, to Maui, for my best friend's wedding. I was to be her maid of honor for the third time. And I wanted to ask him to come with me, but I had a lot of trepidation because he had sabotaged so many romantic getaways. But I decided to trust him, have him come with me. And so we were on the way to go into the cab to go to the airport. And I thought, I need reading material. So I ran up and I grabbed a book that I had started to read. It's called, and I was disappointed that I had picked that one because it wasn't really a beach read, Endless Energy by Dr. Deborah Green, the same person who ended up writing the foreword to my second book. And so I'm on the plane and I'm reading this book and I'm like, wow, she's talking about doing these energy clearings, traumas, like clearing traumas that have been sort of imprinted in your muscles, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So, and I'm going back, reading and then going to the back of the book to read the citations and back and forth. And then I'm in the back of the book and I see her name and her address, and it says Maui, Hawaii. But not only that, her address was Kihei Road, on Kihei Road, and that was where the condo that we had rented was on Kihei. So now, what do you do with that? So the layover, I contact her, and she said when she would be available to give us, each of us, an energy clearing, which took 2 hours each. I said, I have to ask Frank. And I told Frank, I said, look, Frank, Maui, Kihei Road. And he said, well, I guess it's meant to be. So we went and we had our energy clearings. And that was in 2009. And Frank has not had one anger episode since. That's awesome. To my dream guy. So
I get this a lot. Many people claim miracles or divine messages are hard to believe. So, how do you handle, firstly, your own doubts? And then, how do you help people who wrestle with skepticism?
you can't change people's minds. But as I presented my 3 levels of spiritual attainment, when you get to the perspective of faith, your doubts drop away. I mean, how can I have doubts when I've had so many events
Synchronous.
to come to a point where I feel that divine intelligence has provided me with opportunities to experience attaining my true purpose and sublime happiness. I mean, it's hard to doubt. There's no doubt. But I meet with a lot of skepticism. And
Mm,
that's why when I decided to write, the book is not written to convert people to my way
yeah.
of thinking, but it's a way of saying, well, okay, but this is what worked for me. Something else might work for you. But it's interesting that you asked that because when so my first book, I received 100 advanced reader copies, and these are to be distributed to acquaintances, and then they read the book and are ready to provide a review the first week after it's published.
Wow.
So when I did my book proposal, there's a marketing part, and they want you to sort of discern what is your target market and what is not your target market. So what
Right.
I decided was not my target market was the evangelicals
Mm,
and the atheists.
yeah.
So I don't know any evangelicals, but I do know a whole
A
slew of
few atheists.
those, yes. So I gave 10 of the books, 10% of my advanced reader copies to atheists. And I had them answer some questions after they read the book. Well, I was shocked. All 10 of the atheists loved the book. 10 said that they would give it to another atheist. But all 10 said these were not miracles, but these were manifestations of my all powerful mind, that my mind is what created these external events. And I thought,
So,
that is to me stranger than God. I mean, God or divine intelligence makes more sense that my all powerful mind has the power to create these external events. It's one thing to create thoughts, but not
yeah.
external events. So this is people's beliefs, and I don't know if what it would take for them to change their mind. But I can only tell my story.
If someone is new to this space, just beginning to feel like there might be more than what meets the eye, could you share 3 daily or maybe even weekly practices that you can recommend to become more sensitive to the divine language of coincidence?
It's not a curriculum. It's honing your awareness and listening to your inner voice.
Mm,
And so because the divine intelligence communicates with us via the inner voice. It
right.
tells us, like, do this. And if you take that action, whatever the inner voice tells you, and then you attain something beneficial from it, then you trust that inner voice more. It's a process. You take the action, you trust your inner voice, and then you feel this faith just
Right. Yeah.
surface
Trust.
and trust.
It is an innate knowing. It's intuition. It's an innate knowing.
Intuition. Yeah.
We're almost at the end. Before we go, at the end of each episode, I do like to ask my guests something that I call the invisible impact or legacy question, because I do believe that we have an impact on lives we touch, and often in ways that we actually can't see directly. So, as we come to the end and we wrap up, I'd love to know, what's one unseen or invisible impact you hope to leave behind, but not just from our conversation today, but in your life's work?
Well, I think that if there's one takeaway your audience can grasp, is that if extraordinary events can happen to an ordinary woman, they
Mm,
can happen to you.
Sophia, where can people find you? How can they get in touch? How can they get those 2 beautiful books that you've written?
Books are available through Barnes & Noble, Amazon. If you go into my website, which is my name, sophiademas.com, you can get the books through there.
Sophia, this has been really deep. I enjoy conversations like this, and I know many of my listeners will enjoy it too. So I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your day, for sharing your story, sharing your books, and sharing your insights with all of us at the Anatomy of Life.
And Lexi, thank you for your platform.
Thank you for being part of the Anatomy of Life community. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review. It helps people find the show, or share it with a friend who would love it too. Until next time, move through the days ahead, noticing the quiet whispers, the nudges, and the coincidences that shape our path. Perhaps they're not accidents at all, but invitations to listen more deeply, trust more fully, and live more consciously. Keep learning, keep growing, and here is to your health.